Hello, everyone, and welcome to TCR Talks, a little community show where we're going to talk today with the environment artists that have been working on Bloodlines 2. We're going to be talking about the hub, we're going to be talking about Seattle, and all of the wonderful art and environments that they've been creating. So please, everyone, welcome Michael Genesis Asis, Dermott Burns, and Kieran Goodson. Hi, how are you all doing?
Hey, you're great at this, Josh. This
Thank
is
you.
incredible.
I'm,
I
I'm
love it already.
straight into the meat of it, the heart of it. That's where I want to go.
It's so
So
good.
yeah, how are you all feeling? Because I know we've just been talking about the environment of Seattle and this kind of hub area. So where would you like to start with that? Would you like to start talking about kind of our version of Seattle? How did you start building that?
Yeah, that's huge. Yes, we're so excited for everyone to get a hold of it when they can. We're really polishing the game on making sure we're getting the best product so everyone can play it. So that everyone can play it. So we're pretty excited about that. Making Seattle has been really, really fun over the past few years, and this is going to be something we'll probably cover for most of this talk here. Our version of Seattle is a really cool playground from inside the city itself to its own spoke levels or its own extended levels that you can explore. We've made this city really, really nice and compact for you to explore and traverse like a vampire or roleplay as a vampire.
Yeah, so our version of Seattle is split up into a variety of districts, each with their own flavor, theme, and vibe. One of my favorite parts about building this city is that contrast between the different districts, which to some degree represents the different themes within the neo-noir genre. So we're talking depression, moral ambiguity, we're talking about conflicts and political rivals. And we're hoping that those themes are really coming through and you get to feel that as you move from district to district.
Yeah, they have plenty of different ones, I suppose. Like we've got like financial districts, uptown, downtown, some Chinatown in there as well with industrial. So yeah, a nice contrast between the different vibes of those areas. Yeah, interesting like atmosphere as well, which is a big part of VTM and Bloodlines One. As you said about the traversal as well, it's kind of interesting. It's different from the original Bloodlines One. We've got our own traversal system that hopefully will allow you to feel more like a vampire as you traverse. So it's kind of exciting to showcase more of that at some stage. So yeah, excited to talk more about that.
Yeah,
Uh,
quickly.
well, I was wondering, what kind of environmental things have you put in there for the traversal and for that kind of roleplay element? Because I know that you've worked very hard to encourage that atmosphere and then allow people a play space to be the vampire they want to be within that. So is there any specific things that you ended up trying and doing to encourage that?
Yeah, I guess from an environment standpoint, obviously we have designers and things working like hard on the versatile mechanics of the world. It was our role, I guess, in the city to kind of guide the player into certain areas and make their alleyways feel different than the shop fronts and how you can really delve into the world of the masquerade once you get into those alleyways, into those shadows, and kind of choose your own sort of path as well through the city. Find different things in the city, like so. Obviously, with the original one, like the main hubs and the open world sections of the first one is where you actually be able to like make decisions and kind of role play yourself a little bit more. So yeah, it's kind of a big part of it traversing through the city. What you find there in the rooftops and the alleyways. Yeah, so just like from our point of view, from the environment, like it's very important, like the visuals of that, how to guide the player and sort of allow them to know where they can traverse and the feeling of traversing, climbing a wall, like how does that feel? So yeah, really really exciting.
How did you kind of guide the player? Like, were there any tools or tricks that you
Yeah.
use quite often?
Yeah, we can talk. Yeah, I guess like kind of our vision was to keep it very subtle. Like it's not. We tried. Obviously, we have to kind of. We don't want to handhold the player too much. Like you want to feel like a strong vampire that can kind of climb a lot of things. So it's quite. We try to keep it quite subtle, but like we use different things like lighting and how we dress the areas, and the props we use as well, the colors and such like that. But we also just want to make it feel like you're just in a Seattle alleyway, rather than you're in a more gamey environment.
Yeah.
But it also needs to flow nicely as well. It can't, you can't spend too long like looking around for where you have to climb. So we want to kind of flow nice and easily, like from mission spoke to spoke as you traverse through the city, without like having anyone scratch their head for too long. So it's trying to get that balance to be nice. But yeah, I think we've done a really great job with that. In terms of tools and things, and we have like some obviously procedural tools for building the buildings and things in the game, and the actual Traversal assets. So but I guess we shouldn't really talk too much more about that.
Keep it a surprise. No, I like that. That's huge, man. One thing we like to talk about is, for us, we have 3 different levels when we're talking about the city. Ground level is our civilian area. That's where everything happens. We have to keep the masquerade. We have to make sure we're not just overly doing crazy vampire things. And then we have our transition between going from the ground, going up to the rooftops, where now that's our vampire playground, where you're free to do a lot of different things there. Surprise. Feel free to do a lot of different things there. And so that transition between the ground and the roof, that's where you can also play with. Then you can stalk and you can try to go and jump down and bite them, all these other things that you could do in the alleyways and whatnot. But yeah, that's the 3 sections that we always bring up. It was like, all right, this is the ground level, this is masquerade area, then we're going up into the vampire playground, and that's what we're excited for players to play.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You also mentioned, obviously, something we've talked a lot about over the kind of things that we've shared up until now for the art direction, but that is neo-noir. And I know you mentioned that already. So do you have a way that you're thinking about incorporating the neo-noir elements of the narrative and of the art direction into the environments in on all sorts of areas? We've got all sorts of the districts, but also each individual environment, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. This is something that I'm particularly passionate about, which is really sitting at a high level and understanding the core art direction, the story of our game, and distilling that down into a physical environment that you can explore and interact with. So as I mentioned before, different districts have different feelings, but that's very intentional, and that's been designed in a very specific way so that each of these city blocks, they almost feel like characters of their own. Now, depending on which district you are in the city, that a particular clan may have a level of influence over that area, and that should be something that you can feel through the environments themselves, whether it's the way the buildings are laid out, the size and the scale of those buildings. If it's a financial sector, for example, that's really, really big to represent that the influence of the particular people who own those buildings and use those areas have over society in general. But also down to things like the shop fronts, the types of shops you'll find and be walking past on that narrative level, on that ground level, as a member maintaining the masquerade. Each of these city blocks should feel like distinct characters, and the way that we kind of molded and formed those with our artistic tools, with color, shape, and form and texture. These are our paintbrushes that we're using to develop cool and unique blocks within those districts as well. So running around the city should feel like cycling through a really interesting roster of characters in and of itself.
Yeah. I've thought of 2 questions. So let's go with the first one, which is, do you have a favorite like shop front or piece or like dressing or something? Do you each have one of those?
I do. One of my favorite sections is our Pioneer neighborhood, just outside of our Players Haven. Now it's an iconic area within Seattle itself, but it really, for us, embodies that grunge and alt rock spirit of Seattle, that music genre that was really birthed with people like Pearl Jam and Nirvana, Soundgarden, and that area is particularly bohemian, I guess. Like it's not super wealthy, but it's also not super ultra run down. There's wealth in that area, and but it's young, it's fresh, and it's exciting, and it's much more, I guess, down to earth and rebellious than maybe some of the fancier uptown sections of the map. And the shop fronts reflect that too. So of course, in uptown, you'll find the kind of classic Christmassy department stores and more established international brands. But in our downtown section, in our Pioneer section, you will absolutely find those kind of smaller, weirder, wackier little establishments. And that's been something really, really cool, not only to research and learn about, but to put in the game too.
Nice. Jen, you got a favorite?
I was actually going to say Pioneer, but it's all good. You can think, bro.
You can share. That's good.
No. There's this one landmark that I really like that's specific to our game. Is the atrium. The lighting that's been placed there is incredibly beautiful to just stand and see. That's from the in the transition between uptown and a financial area, but that kind of vibe, comparing it to Pioneer, which what Kieran was saying, it was a lot grungier. That's the kind of contrast that we want to make sure the player has that vibe and has that feel. Like they're not just playing the same environment again and again when they cross over different blocks, but then see they're like, oh, I know where I am because of what I see and how I feel about it around. But yeah, I'll talk about the atrium. That's cool. Or I'll take the atrium. What do you do it?
Yeah, I think it's probably the Chinatown area of the hub. I just think it's so vibrant and distinct and very like active and quite. I know it feels a bit chaotic as well. So I always find it's a kind of interesting area you kind of come to. It feels like you've stumbled across like a very distinct area of the city. So yeah, it's always one that kind of sticks out to me, and kind of the unique environments, the unique dressing around. Like it just feels like a very unique vibe. The city there. So yeah, it's quite colorful and vibrant. It's always kind of a favorite of mine. Yeah, I also like the financial as well. I think when you traverse through, sorry, if I'm allowed to choose two.
Go for it. Go for it.
Like the feeling of that like corrupt corporate feeling when you're like kind of you're in the canopy of the buildings. You're kind of like you're not at the very very top. There's these skyscrapers that kind of just like tower above you, like through the fog of the city. They just kind of towering over you, and I think like in the original Bloodlines, like the financial area was always kind of one of my favorites. So I think I like that feeling of these like huge buildings towering above you. The kind of, I know the corporate coldness of it all as well. So it's a nice part of the city to kind of traverse through when you're like running across rooftops, I guess.
Nice. Yeah, we're kind of talking about these distinct areas and districts and how they look and feel. And obviously, we cannot simulate the entirety of Seattle. That would be quite the task. But how have you thought about piecing the kind of our version of Seattle, our vampiric little corner, and all the important parts that we've picked out to be in the game, and how we've connected those together? How did that process go?
I can talk about briefly. So we have a lot of our decision making comes also from what characters we face and how the story progresses and unfolds throughout, and then from there we are able to distinguish. All right, Kieran talked about earlier. This district is owned by this, and this. Then we were able to find out. All right, let's say Dutchman's Bar with Silky inside of it. We know that's going to be a landmark that has to be there. Then how do we dress the surrounding blocks around that, from Cam HQ and whoever's owning that, then how that goes and how their influence goes over to that financial district. A lot of that goes in play in how we craft the city together. And then there's the added layer of clan contacts, where for you to progress in your clan, where you're going to meet them, how do you meet them, then we put those also into the map. And then that from that layer we also talk about Seattle landmarks. What Seattle landmarks would benefit players to go across, so that they can identify where they are in the map and try to know how to get to certain places as well. So there's different sections and different beacons that would allow you to traverse your way through the hub, and that's how we're able to craft this version of our Seattle like a playground, like where you do have landmarks of Seattle, and then you do recognize, all right, this is this person's territory, this is that different type of vibe, from color schemes to different lightings and different district and different billboards that you're going to be able to see, and all of these things, crafting them together so that, sure, you're not running across a block after block after block, like 10-15 blocks of nothingness, but you do feel like, all right, this is the territory that I'm in, and then when I'm feeling like I'm crossing across this other territory and this other territory, rather than being bored going from big sections together. But yeah, Dermot, you want to add anything for that one?
Yeah. Just like on your last point there, like, so exactly, the scale of the environment as well. It's something we've kind of adjusted and changed throughout as design have changed, the traversal and the movements of the game. So I think it's something that's really hard to get right with open worlds. I think Bloodlines isn't known for its vast environments. I think the original one had that density of interesting things to find, as you said, Jen. So I think, like, obviously our environment's bigger, but I think with our new traversal system, we've came to a nice sweet spot between being able to traverse through the city, maybe find a few interesting things off the path, but also maybe you miss a few things, you come back and you'll find them later on. It's kind of interesting, without, as you said there, Jen, having to traverse across this huge city that's just maybe there's not as attention to detail there, so it's kind of a little bit more handcrafted. And I think we've come to a really nice size where it doesn't feel like every time you go back from a spoke into the hub where you feel like, oh, I have to travel the whole way across this huge area. So I think it's kind of a nice, we iterated quite a bit, so we're a nice sweet spot now. I think, yeah, it's really fun to run around, and there's like hidden things here and there that you can kind of find. So I think that's a big part of Bloodlines as well. So I think trying to get that was kind of important.
I think the really good keyword there is handcrafted. That's something we really put a lot of effort into. We didn't let just systems let the whole thing populate on its own and then pick and choose. We've really put our hands in, like literally put our hands in at every single building, every single alleyway, and we've really moved stuff around to make sure it's nicely polished for everyone. But yeah, handcraft is such a good word, Dermot. Well done.
Kind of
What
bunch
about you,
of
Kieran?
stuff like I was saying with the characters of the blocks, but I'm sure you can talk more about that. But yeah, kind of, it works well with that kind of art direction that you were talking about earlier, Kieran. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think the art of putting this city together has been really understanding on a deep level what are the needs for the narrative of this game, and what are the design needs, not just the level design and the different heights and the traversal systems, but also the game design in terms of the pacing of these missions and how you actually get across the city. As environment artists, it's our job to understand those needs as well as meet our own needs of representing a realistic Seattle within our neo-noir genre, and really find the sweet spot. As you said, I think during early production, it took a while to find that sweet spot. We had slightly different scaled map and different traversal mechanisms back then, and it's taken some time to really massage a lot of those elements together and find the sweet spot. But I think we're in a really, really good place with it all at the moment.
Yeah,
100%.
Nice. One thing that you mentioned, Jen, while you were describing how these things came together, was the clan contacts. And now we've shown people a little bit like of all the different places that they can visit to go and talk to all sorts of characters, actually. But I guess the clan contacts in particular are things like Wake the Dead Cafe and the Dutchman and the Hole in the Wall and Aurora Pawn. And I was wondering how you put those little places together and where, like, how you decided where they went and what fit the vibe of the character.
Yeah, so it comes with a lot of, again, back and forth. Nothing is usually, especially in game dev, it's never a linear process. It always, all right, let's do this, let's try it out, we'll play test it, we'll figure on when you go from this location to that location, how would that feel? Are these two clan connects areas too close to each other, and what does that mean? It doesn't mean like they're battling or why are they too close to each other and all of that. So it's a lot of back and forth, really. It's hard to pinpoint one answer on, all right, we place this here and that was there forever. It was rarely that case. It was like, all right, this was here for a while, and then from there let's say Aurora Pawn moved from slightly further downtown to now closer to Chinatown, let's say, and that helps with how the rest of the blocks around that would then be dressed. And so pinpointing one area is usually doesn't happen, but that just goes with openness for iteration, and then also making sure you're working with your co-departments and making having their say on how we lay things out, and then have a lot of back and forth with everyone. Yeah, it's hard putting this to words because there's so many from so many discussions and so many meetings from before, and then giving an answer of why did you do this? I was like, oh, we had so many discussions on
Yeah,
how
I
we were
guess
able to do this.
that's one thing about game development is like it's a very long process and it's iterative, and what seems like a simple question it clearly isn't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's so much that we'd love to put in, but then also so much that we are able to do only, and from there make sure we still have something that's running well and being done correctly. As much as we'd like to talk about how we've placed this certain character or this certain clan connect in this area, at the moment where they've been places we feel is suits well for the players to explore the whole map well. You're not going to be just stuck in one section of the map and be like, oh, all the clan trainers or all the clan connects are in that section. It's like, oh no, you're going to be exploring different parts of the map to get them, to find out where they are, and then talk to them multiple times throughout the game. And that makes us happy as environment artists. Like, all right, you're not just going to be in one section of the game, you're going to explore everything that we've put our heart and soul into. You know. But yeah, long answer short, it's a lot of back and forth, but where they are placed now allows the player to explore properly the whole map, and somewhat come close to where mission ends, let's say, and all right, they need to go to this clan and talk to this clan connect, and so we craft that path on how they get to that clan connect. So it's lots of different reasons and decisions come together for that.
Yeah. And I think something we've touched on a little bit is obviously the vibe, the je ne sais quoi that kind of ties it all together, and I guess essentially is there to make you feel like a vampire, right? So you can walk around these different areas, you can feel powerful or quick or supernatural or like a predator. And I think before you mentioned something about like dragging people into alleys, and especially there's lots of these connecting places, these secret places in between. And I was wondering if you could talk about how you're hoping to enable those like vampire roleplay like moments for people.
Yeah, so briefly mentioned earlier, for example, I know it's been talked about before with Blood Residents, where you're able to talk to civilians in the street, and there's different reactions that they'll give you and how you'd like them to react. You could bring them into an alleyway and do your thing with them. And but yeah, these are things that we craft so that how you feel from, let's say, the bright roadscapes from there coming into an alleyway where it's more dingier and more private, less civilians are going to be in that area, less homelessness as well, so that you can give your private moment to hunt stuff like that. Or even where, let's say, Dermott talking about different traversal elements where we have, let's say, even ledges where you could walk at the side of buildings, where you could then see, depending again where you are in the story, to see what type of residence that you need and all of that, and then from there scope out your prey, pick one. And
when you're talking about the ledges and things, I think you've already brushed on this like previously, Jen. It's like that feeling like you're down in with civilians on the street, so you're kind of in the masquerade, you're blending in with the crowd, you're talking to them, but as you go into the alleyways, it's kind of just that like contrast where you become more powerful, you become like stronger essentially, because you can become a vampire essentially without breaking the masquerade. You get to the city rooftops, and then that's when you're like looking down onto the streets, preying like a true vampiric predator. You know, it's just that feeling of contrast from when you feel maybe slightly a bit more weaker when you're in the streets. Like you just feel it because the chances, the potentiality of masquerade and you know, police or whatever sort of whatever you might meet in the streets, and then as you get to the rooftops, you can, like, I guess, potentially role play a bit more, or like be your true vampire that you choose to be, I suppose. So I think that's kind of important as well, the kind of with the vibe as well, getting that feeling. Yeah.
Kieran?
Hear more.
Yeah, internally we call this the separation between worlds.
Yeah.
And so the mouth of the alleyway where it meets the sidewalk and the streets it should feel like a veil of darkness. So you go out and transition from a bright, busy, bustling street into a slightly quiet and darker alleyway, and that transition is really kind of a metaphor for that transformation for the player. You essentially roleplay from a normal civilian into the predator that you are, and the beauty and the spark of our gameplay is that switch can happen instantly. So for example, if you were to be tailing a pedestrian who goes down an alleyway and it's a dead end, perhaps for parking or a garage or something like that, it'll be a dead end for the pedestrian, but of course not for you. You're a vampire. You can scale the buildings, you can feed on them if you need, and that instant switch is really appealing and really exciting for the vampire fantasy.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of things that normal pedestrians wouldn't be able to traverse between these spaces, as well as, you know, the lighting and the sound and like the different vibe as you move and, I guess, literally walk between these places, right?
Of course, yeah, and the pacing of the gameplay was drastically different, as you can imagine. You're strongly encouraged by the Masquerade to behave on the streets, and gameplay is has much more of a narrative focus. You're doing much more walking and observing and taking the atmosphere in. But once you enter that alleyway, that's a really interesting tunnel of gameplay where you transition from that slow walking narrative style of gameplay into this hyper rapid jumping, leaping, gliding vampire that you are. So the alleyways are a particular gem in our city, and something that we've worked really, really hard with our level design department to make sure that looks and feels not only realistic, but something that's fun to get around and traverse.
Yeah, there's a lot of consequences that's going to happen street level or human world level is what we're talking about, ground. And you really get to be who you are meant to be when you enter these areas, especially in the rooftops where you get to do tons of things, which is fun. Put a lot of heart and soul into this, and pretty happy, pretty excited.
Yeah,
pretty excited.
Everyone's worked really hard, and I'm sure that the players are really excited to see it as well. So thanks for explaining all of that. Really appreciate it. And until next time, when we will hopefully be talking to another community guest, thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Thanks, Joshua.
Take care. Thank you.
All
Bye-bye.
right.